All right, so welcome everybody, and it's Chamber Matt here. And this morning, I have got Representative Jesse Young, who is I can never remember. He's the Republican from the 26th Legislative District, running for position one. One, I got it right this time. All right, so that means the next time it's two.
Yeah.
That'll be simple. So Jesse's running for position two, and
No, I'm running for position one.
you're position one. You're still one.
I'm still one.
You're still one. Okay. So Jesse is still running for position number one in the legislative district, the 26th, which encompasses South Kitsap, the Gig Harbor area, Key Peninsula, all the way to the Narrows Bridge. So Jesse, thanks for joining us this morning. It's a pretty simple venue. You participated in our primary interview. And I would encourage anybody that didn't see how Jesse stood on some of those issues. We talked a lot about taxes in the first interview session. So I encourage everybody to go check that out on YouTube. So Jesse, I've got 6 questions for you today. Some of them are pretty simple. Some of them you might have to put your thinking cap on for. But in any case, I expect you'll do well on them. So. The first question is,
Here are my notes, by the way.
All right. First, tell us a little bit about yourself. What caused you to run in the first place, and then continuing to put up with the political world here in Washington State, and why do you think you're the best person to serve the citizens of the 26th Legislative District?
Okay, so why and then how? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as many of you, I know, Matt, you know this, but as many of the people that might be watching this may know, a lot of my legislative motivation is informed by how I grew up. I was raised in Tacoma and experienced a lot of poverty and homelessness. And fortunately, I was able to rise up out of that. Some providence mixed in with some caring people, a mom that prayed for me a lot. And I was able to graduate from Wilson High School in Tacoma as valedictorian. I was named a Washington State Scholar. I was a Procter & Gamble National Science Award winner that year. And I really dove into the books on just, kind of the hope that would lead to, some opportunity to rise up out of poverty. And it did. And I was fortunate to be accepted into the University of Notre Dame. And after 4 years there, I graduated with a degree in business and technology and parlayed that into a successful consulting career in software engineering and technology down in, as I grew my career, consulted really around the nation, around the world in these areas. And, along that pathway, married my high school sweetheart. We ended up moving back home because when I started traveling, it didn't matter where I traveled from. So I got back home and noticed a couple of things. I noticed that all the friends that I grew up with in the projects were still poor. Not all of them, but you understand, most of them. And I noticed that the neighborhoods had never been really improved. And yet, this paradigm that I'd grown up in where, and at the time I was a very strong Democrat. And I looked and said, well, the Democrats have been in charge here forever. Why haven't they not fixed it? Why are my friends on welfare still? And that really started to gnaw on me. And of course, I started having children. And I have risen to a level of success where I can make sure that my children will never know the poverty that I grew up with. And but what about my friends? I still care about them. And then that leads to greater questions. And as you start to question your purpose in this world and the skills that you bring to the table, what you're going to do not only for your family, but your common man, it really started to make me question what was going on. And one thing was certain was that the people that were in charge, especially in Tacoma, hadn't fixed it. And that really was frustrating to me. And so as I started getting more politically active, it, and really starting to consider these things, it led down a path that not only turned me pretty conservative pretty fast, that motivated me to finally run. And so, in 2014, I was very honored to be unanimously appointed by a bipartisan commission of Kitsap County commissioners and Pierce County council members, and unanimously appointed in the legislature, and the district has sought to reelect me every year since, or every election since. And so I stand before you now as a man that's still motivated to fix these problems. I have worked diligently and very hard to make sure that my time in the legislature is one that shows success, but is something that whether you voted for me or not, you still feel like I brought something to the table on your behalf. And whether that's solving the Comaners Bridge issues and stopping the tolls from rising there so that average everyday commuters can afford to go to work and still put food on the table, or whether it's standing up for homelessness issues, which I've been lauded for and have led with many bipartisan attempts or offers in terms of legislation to do. As a matter of fact, Matt, many people don't know this. I'm the first legislator in over 20 years, 2 decades, that has ever broken from my own caucus to side with the other caucus to give them the vote they needed to get something passed off the floor of the House. And that was on the low income housing bill. And I broke with my caucus because, again, at the end of the day, I'm not here to just support a party. I'm here to support my constituency. And as one that's come out of homelessness, that's a major issue. So I've done that. And of course, I've got, I think, one of the best bipartisan records in my time in service, both on the environment, on homelessness issues, and other things. But that's my motivation. And I think that's why that answers the how. Why want to bring me back? Well, I've led very successfully at getting things passed. I've kept true to my word to deliver real solutions for the district. And I believe I offer a unique skill set. I'm the only representative in the entire House that serves on 2 budget committees in leadership. I'm good at diving into those numbers. And if you want somebody that's going to continue to roll up his sleeves and that type of work done for you while you're trying to live your life, I'm the guy for you, and I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Jesse. So the next question is another, I don't know, it's an opinion one, but what do you see as the most important challenges facing the state, and how would you propose addressing them?
Okay, well, we have a major budget crisis in addition to a pandemic, in addition to a jobs problem, because the economy has been shut down. I've advocated that we need to reopen the state legislature so that we can get in and fix some of these problems so that people that are on unemployment can actually get their unemployment checks. And that's been a major, major failure under the governor's reign right now, because he won't call us back in to session to help fund these things. The governor cannot allocate money; only the legislature can. But the governor hasn't wanted to call us in because he's worried. He doesn't want another seat at the table to negotiate how the economy should work or how it should be opened back up. So with regard to getting the economy going and making sure people can afford to put food on the table, they can afford their rent or their mortgage payments, we have to solve that crisis, because at what point does that become a bigger issue than social distancing? And we have health things that we have to do, but there's a way to open up this economy. And I just have a hard time believing that you can allow for big box stores like Costco and Walmart to open up or literally socially not distancing, having to stand in line and go into and buy groceries with other people that could be sick. But at the same time, a small business person, a barber shop, can't open up. Allow one of the stores to open up with lots of traffic going through there, but you can't a mechanic to get out there and do his job, or somebody that makes service calls, or a contractor to get out there and build a fence for somebody out in their yard. Those things have to be addressed, but it's not just opening them back up now. We've got people that literally had to shutter their businesses. We need to fix those problems. That's priority number one, because those people are having existential threats. You're talking about, what about a contractor that supports his wife that maybe has health issues, or maybe supports an in-law that has health issues? What about those people being able to afford to get those people into a hospital, get them the care that they need? That's just as much a real life threat to somebody's well-being as potentially contracting COVID. So there, we have to do that. Secondarily, we have a lot of money. I've wanted to call us back into session because we have over $2 billion in the rainy day fund that we've been wanting to allocate for additional health concerns, to make sure that people are provided for, make that we have all the resources we need to socially distance and make sure that people are covered from a health perspective. So that would be priority 1A and 1B between it, getting the economy going back up so people can provide for their own self and their own families, but also making sure that we're spending the money that we do have. We saved that money and had it in the rainy day account, and for the governor not to call us back into session so that we can use it and deploy it to effect, it to me is a big missed opportunity. And so those would be the top two things. And then we've got another problem here, and that is schooling for our kids. This remote distance learning is failing a lot of underserved and low-income communities that either A, don't have access to broadband, don't have access to resources, and to deny them that is really giving our kids a disadvantage. And so those are the top three things that I'm looking forward to addressing, Olympia.
Outstanding. Appreciate those answers. So this is this next is the big tax question, and so quite simply put, we've got B&O taxes, we've got gas taxes, we've got excise tax, we've got a sales tax, there's an income tax, there's a capital gains tax, payroll taxes, emission taxes, road mileage taxes. There's just about a tax on everything.
Yeah.
Are there solutions other than taxes available to address our budget shortfall? You mentioned the $2 billion reserve. That's not going to be enough. What is your preferred method of dealing with our budget shortfall? And before you answer that, I just got a flash on my screen that says my internet is unstable, so I may lose you, Jesse. But if that's the case, then we'll have to dial back up again.
Matt, I've always questioned your stability just a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
No, okay. So yeah, we have lots of taxes, and that seems to be another big proposal, and maybe it's taken more center stage for some people. In June, so again, I've told you in my opening statement that I serve in leadership on 2 budget committees. So I serve on the finance committee. That's a very exclusive committee reserved for people that get voted into it, but you got to kind of have some chops on the finance side and do that. Here are the numbers from June. In June, it came back and said that we were $8+ billion in the deficit, and that we're going to have a major catastrophe. Now that deficit is over a 4-year horizon, of which at that time about 3+ years were still left. Okay, so every quarter we get a new forecast that comes back. What the media didn't really cover was that in June we had that $8 billion plus deficit. What they didn't report was that our economy was still producing at a higher output than it was the year before. We actually had more revenue coming into the state through taxes, the current taxing structure, than we did in 2019. In other words, while the economy was taking a hit, it was still producing resources for us, revenue for us. And what that should tell you is that if the economy is producing more revenue, where's that deficit come from? Well, that deficit was not current spending, it was new spending. It's new spending that's going to happen in a few years based off of the new programs that were passed in Olympia, mostly along party lines. In other words, we could tighten our belt on future spending and still make the current and fit the current needs. All the current spending that we had have allocated for low-income people, for mental health issues, for schools, for underserved communities, whether it's transportation related with public transportation for people that need to rely upon that, or it's resources in healthcare for people that are struggling to afford their medicine. We have all of that already funded. It was new projects that they wanted to do, and they didn't talk about that. So the key to answering your question, which is there another alternative than to just more taxes to generate the revenue that they say we need to make up the deficit? Well, the first answer is, well, let's really understand what that deficit is. It's not a risk to, it was a risk to future spending. Next, if you compare what happened in June, and the media has not covered this at all, which is really, really sad. If you go back and you look at the previous forum that we did with you, one of the things I advocated a Boise solution. And the Boise solution was based off of, let's cut the B&O tax on businesses so that we can spike the growth, so we can spike economic growth, which produces more activity in the, because if we do that way, if we, if we prime the pump a little bit and the economy starts to come back quicker, then have more revenue, which means our deficit goes down without having to raise taxes. And if the deficit comes down that way, then that's less cuts that we have to consider, or less as an alternative tax increases. Well, what happened in September? In September, the economy came back greater than any of us had thought. And instead of being an $8 billion deficit in September, that deficit was cut more than half, by $4.6 billion just vanished out of that deficit because the tax revenue that we were getting without new taxes came back. So now we're sitting at a deficit of about $3.8 billion, not 8.8+ billion. So we're sitting at a deficit of 3.8 billion. And so my question is, if that's what happened just in 3 months from June to September, what are we going to get in December as the economy starts to return, as things start to open up, as Christmas starts to kick off? I'm expecting, and now our analysts are starting to expect that that deficit is going to shrink even more. So is there really a deficit to have to deal with? Well, right now you suggested it's still almost $4 billion. But then I come back and mention something, and you already talked about it. We have a rainy day fund. We have $2.5 billion in there. If our current deficit projection as of September now is down to 4 billion range, and you take out half billion because we've got the money ready in the rainy day number is only about 1.3. But that's what you pay me to go back and do, and that's what I work on for you. And how do we get that? I would submit this easy answer is we don't need new taxes. We need to continue on with what we're doing, economic under the model of taxation that we have, maybe prime it with the Boise plan, which if anybody wants to know about, they can see the other video that we did, because I'm pretty sure I went into length on that. And that would prime the pump. It would juice the economy. You would see more people in your local purview as the head of the chamber there start to produce revenue again. These people able to provide for themselves. They're going to hire more people, and then we climb ourselves out of this hole instead of digging it deeper with more taxes.
All right, thank you, Jesse. Outstanding. So next question. This is a workforce question, education. One issue facing local businesses is finding adequately trained workforce. Education funding is often left to levies. Let's start over. Education funding is too often left to levies and not adequately funded. What ideas do you have to update our school funding, and how would you implement those changes?
So it's a complex question, but it really starts with McCleary. And in 2017, when the legislature came to a grand compromise between Republicans and Democrats, and people need to remember at the time, Republicans had control of the Senate. And so it forced everybody to come together because we had a seat at the table and they couldn't get it passed for a fix to McCleary unless Republicans agreed. The solution that we came out with in 2017 really reallocated the formula at the state level. So that took a lot of burden off the local levies and bonds that are run at the local level to tax people usually on their property taxes. That solved it. The problem was later that year in 17, one of the Republican senators died of cancer. There was a special election, and that election went to the Democrats, and that allowed them to take control of the Senate again. And with control of the Senate in 2018, and then going forward in 19 especially, they changed that grand compromise. And what it did is it reopened up the paradigm. And if anybody has seen over the past couple of years, we had really taken a burden off of the local taxation. You saw a lot of your county auditors and assessors come through and take advantage of the lull because there was going to be a downturn in taxes. It was going to spike in 18, come down in 19 as we removed one system of taxation for schools and put in the other system. And in between there, the auditors didn't really play fair, and they jacked up all your appraised values because they're setting themselves up to lower your effective rate so that they can come back in future years and then rate and say that your rate is so low we can afford to raise it. And that's putting a lot of pressure on people's incomes or budgets because the county assessors wanted to gobble up that money. Well, in the middle of the county assessors doing that, which they should not have done, the safeguards we had in place were all taken away because when the legislature or when the Senate went back to the Democrats, they came through and said, well, we didn't really like the compromise that we had to settle on. And so we want the model that we want. And so they started to go back into a model that allowed more local negotiation on these levies, which puts pressure at the local community. And the reason why they did that was because the large union for the teachers wants to negotiate locally on a lot of these things. And so they wanted the ability to negotiate greater pay raises and other considerations in local school districts. And it's harder for them to get that if they have to take care of it at the state level all at once, as opposed to the local level. And so what you have is kind of a amalgamation of a number of bills. And the result is we've got a Frankenstein with regard to our tax policy at the local level. And so you had a McCleary fix that was going to alleviate the local pressure on these levies. And now they took away the restraints that we had in that compromise bill in 2017. And you now got this ability where the taxes are now higher at the state level, but now they've made it so that you can raise them again at the local level. That's not the right way to do this. Um, of course, I believe that the fundamental fix is going to be through a school choice option and allowing parents, especially with what we've seen at COVID, if you want to, if you want to fix the local levy level, you got to address it at the state level for funding. And then that funding should give parents more options to decide where their kids go and how that money is spent, instead of being forced into a paradigm where they have to take what they get, and their kids can't even go back to school in person. So.
All right, thank you. So then, still talking about education, what responsibility does the state and federal government have to provide a quality education for our students, not just K-12, but kindergarten through college? And should the government, beyond the local school boards, play a role in the development and implementation of school curriculum?
Well, I can tell you fundamentally that there's no enumerated right in the Constitution that gives the federal government purview here. And anytime you see the federal government step in to local school making decisions, they gum it up. And in the first couple of years that I came into Olympia, one of the bigger debates that we had at the time was whether or not we should follow and take and receive the money that came with strings attached from the No Child Left Behind Act, which was an Obama administration goal. Now, I'm not saying that this was just Bush did it with his paradigm when he was in as a Republican, but every time the federal government comes in and tries to tempt us with money, it forces through a top-down mandate on everybody that screws up any local flexibility that you need. And guess what? We need that flexibility, because the way you run a school district in Seattle is not going to work for how you need to run it in rural South Kitsap. It is completely different. Your schools are more spaced out. There's rural considerations, the bus routes, everything that you have to coordinate is different. And when you have these federal mandates that say, thou shall only provide education in this manner, it is usually only focused on urban centers, and it doesn't work for rural settings. In that regard, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't enumerate that right in the Constitution, and why I believe that we need to focus on local control. And so one of the things that was a bipartisan decision that we came to in 2015 was on that bill. And we decided, Democrats and Republicans alike decided, that we would not take the federal dollars because the strings that came attached were going to hamstring our teachers with the way that they wanted to test teachers. And as a result of supporting that, I actually had the endorsement of the Washington Education Association that year, and they were surprised that a Republican was willing to stand up on that. But I believe in local control, and I believe in supporting our teachers and giving them the flexibility to educate our kids rather than telling them how to do their job. I don't think that some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. knows how to educate a kid better than a teacher here in South Kitsap. I certainly don't believe I should tell that teacher how to do their job. I believe they should have local flexibility and control. And so from the standpoint of the top down and the way this would work, we need to always try to very resolutely focus on as many local options for parents, for students, and for teachers, and local control in that regard. And if you do that, you'll see a lot less waste in terms of money. You'll see a lot more flexibility restore in terms of teachers being able to accommodate either class size or how do you deal with when you've got a class where you've got some really high performers over here and you've got some other kids that are struggling over here. When you have top-down mandates, the flexibility for a teacher to accommodate these kids and these kids at the same time goes away, because they have to accommodate them all with a standard test that works for neither group. And so again, local control is the key.
All right, thank you, Jesse. So the last question coming up here. Beyond direct financial support, like the grants that came through the CARES Act and money that's come down from the Washington State Department of Commerce, is there any other local support that government can provide the businesses, the small businesses in our communities, to assist in the recovery of COVID-19?
Absolutely. How about we get off their back for a little bit and let them recover? The truth is if your battery dies, you need a jump. And the government should be providing a jump to these local small businesses. And so, my Boise plan is crafted specifically to really the answer, and provides the answer to the question you just asked. And as I think we need to cut B&O taxes on businesses for a good 18 months. Well, that's what I was asking back in April. We could go to 12 months now, but we cut the B&O tax. The B&O tax in this state is a joke. It taxes you on your gross income, not your net receipts. That is very disadvantageous to local small businesses, especially that have, when you're a small business, you're starting up, you have to have a little nest egg over on the side to make your tax payments, to make your payroll payments, to pay people. You have to have that, because if you don't have that buffer, what happens if your receipts that come in don't match up with your outlays? Well, that nest egg is gone. Everybody's used it for COVID to try to stretch things out and survive. How about we increase their margins on the profit that they make by cutting the B&O taxes for just a short period of time to allow, that's the jump start that we're trying to give them. And then secondarily, what I would say is a number of businesses that were working have shuttered their business. And so now you're going to, as the economy starts to open back up, you're going to see new players enter the market. And one of the most regressive and I think troublesome taxes that you see are all the local fees, like impact fees and stuff that you see impacted at the local level. You know, where I can remember there's a business that opened up in a strip mall just opposite of the Costco here in the 26th district. And I remember talking to the business owner, and he said, we almost didn't open up. And I go, well, what happened? He said, well, we had our business plan all laid out. The partners pooled some money together. We had a couple $100,000 ready to start this business. And then we had a loan that we were going to take out to cover the rest. And then the city came down and implied, said, hey, you know what? You need to pay a $50,000 traffic impact fee just to start, just to get the permits to open the door. They haven't even sold a single pizza yet. And they're still going to have to pay a $50,000 traffic impact fee. Every reasonable person knows that it's not that small pizza place that's driving traffic in that area. It's the Costco, and Costco already paid to build those roads out through their taxes. So why are you putting this penalty on this local small business that wants to start up and employ people? And then they came down. That wasn't the only one, because it wasn't just 50,000. They also came back and said, oh, you also need to pay a $30,000 sewer impact fee. These impact fees that nobody knows are out there are effectively taxes, and they prohibit people from starting up and employing people in our economy. And local small business is the engine that we need to turn back on to grow ourselves out of this economy. So to answer your question, I think that we should give them a break on their B&O taxes. And I think we should also put a moratorium on impact fees at the local level for the same period of time, so that these guys can afford to actually start up and employ people. And that would be the jump start we need to get businesses going.
All right, great answer, Jesse. Thank you. So now to wrap things up, I want to remind everybody that this video is obviously, if you're watching it, it's on YouTube, but there are also other videos that are available from the candidate interviews for both this election and the primary election that we had. I think it was in August. So if you haven't had a chance to review those, that one in particular, Jesse goes into his Boise plan and the B&O tax relief side of things a lot. So, but Jesse, I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to give you an opportunity here to kind of wrap things up in a couple minutes, and then you can get back onto the campaign trail, which I'm sure is you're eager to wrap up coming up here in about 3 weeks. I think ballots are actually dropping sometime in the next few days also for Kitsap County. So,
yes, they are.
Yeah. So wrap things up for us, Jesse.
Oh, thank you, Matt, and thank you to the chamber for putting these on. I do appreciate the opportunity to get my message out. Look, the sad part that is we're seeing happen with all this chaotic environment around us at the national level, at the local level, especially in politics, is that everything is getting nasty. And all you see is negativity, and you see accusations made, you see names being called. And I think more than ever, what we need right now is a voice of reason that's going to stand up for folks and just roll up their sleeves and focus more on getting the job done rather than political hyperbole. And I believe I'm that candidate. I think I've shown that through the way I've legislated. I think I've shown that in the way that I've made myself available to all of my community. I'm the only representative, only legislator in the state that has maintained a consistent office in district that is always open to people to come in and be available to me. I'm in that office right now today. I try to go above and beyond. I've always kept my pledge to be the most transparent legislator in Olympia, senator, representative. And I measure that. And I told everybody when I first came into office, I said, I will be the most transparent and publicly available representative. And not only have I done that through my availability here in district, but I've also done that through, I've held by a large degree the largest number of town halls since I've been appointed and elected into office, more than any other person elected to office during that time. And I don't just hold those town halls here where it's convenient. I go out into the community and I do these and I put myself available. And there's never any, there's never a mediator between me and the people. All questions are answered, no holds barred, if you will, and I'm here to answer questions. I hope I demonstrated to you today that without notes, without reading some script or being teleprompted in some way, shape, or form, I demonstrated my leadership by being able to answer these questions candidly, by being in the know on these things. If you want somebody that will be that voice of reason, then always stand up for you, for your family, for our communities on any issues, whether it's standing up for the police. And by the way, Matt, I'm happy to note that I have the endorsement of the Washington WACOPS organization, the Washington Council on Police and Sheriffs. And that's very big for me now, especially with all the rioting and protesting going on. I think we need to stand up for our policing and first responder communities. I'm going to continue to do that even when it's not popular, even when my opponent comes out and says that I'm a domestic terrorist because I want to stand up for police. Are you kidding me? Look, this is a chaotic time, and I will be that champion if you want that. I will be that voice of reason that stands in the gap, even if they call me names. And I think it's a fair question to ask for anybody that's listening now. If they'll call me those names, if my opponent is elected in, what are they going to call you? Because I'm standing in the gap and I'm willing to take that heat because I believe it's of service to everybody I represent. So with that, Matt, I appreciate everything. And listen, man, if you want to feel really young on election night, then vote young. And I would love to serve you. Thanks.
That's good. Feel really young. Yeah. Yeah. I need to feel much younger. So thank you, Jesse. Thank you to everybody who's watched this. Again, go ahead and watch the other interviews. And Jesse, do you got a website or what's the best way for people to get a hold of you or find out more about you?
Best way is to go to votejesseyoung.com. Real simple. We make it easy, and you can find all the information you need on there.
Is it Vote Jesse Young or is it Vote JY?
No, my my website is Vote Jesse Young. My email domain is Vote JY.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, wanted to make sure you knew what your own website address was.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. All right, Jesse. Thank you very much for joining us today, and good luck on election night. And hopefully, if you make it through, then we'll have to have some more conversations.
I'll look forward to it, Matt. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. All right. Bye.